Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you, and we've got a big show for you today, including really an incredible moment at the White House honoring Charlie Kirk on what would have been his birthday. We're going to talk about that. Senator, you were there, but also we've got an update as well on the government shutdown.
Well, it is day 15 of the Schumer shutdown. The government remains shut down. We voted on Tuesday to reopen the government. The Republicans voted to reopen the government, and sadly the Democrats continued to say, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. Now today, October 15th, the president is doing something that is really kind of wrecking the Democrats' playbook, which is the president moved funds around within the Department of War, and he said, we're going to pay our servicemen and women. We're going to send out their paychecks. I think Schumer and the Democrats were counting on these paychecks not going out. You have a number of Democrats expressing their dismay about it. We're going to break that down and tell you what's happening about the shutdown. We're also going to talk about, as you noted, Tuesday, President Trump in the Rose Garden gave Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I was there. It was an incredible event. It honored his life. We're going to talk to you about that as well.
Yeah, it's a really important conversation that we're going to have about that, and it's one that's not being reported on as well. So we hope that you guys are going to take that story and share it wherever you can on social media, sharing this podcast. We're going to have that for you in a moment. Many of you may not know this. I actually own two different barbecue restaurants, one right now, and the quality of meat when you want to make amazing food is so vitally important. Now, you've heard of Big Pharma, but have you ever heard of Big Ag? Did you know that 85% of American beef is controlled by just 4 major companies? Just because you buy American doesn't mean you're buying healthy. And buying organic only means they control what the cattle eat, not how they live. Well, that's why I want you to know about Backyard Butchers. It is Texas steer steaks that come directly from a real Texas ranch where the cattle are raised, processed, and shipped from the same location, completely bypassing Big Ag. These Texas steers are 98% grass-fed and then 2% natural grain finished. That's how you get amazing steaks with no growth hormones, no antibiotics, and no preservatives. The quality and flavor are just straight up exceptional. Making America healthy again? Yes, that is a big deal. And it starts with going back to our roots and eating real meat from the hardworking ranchers who raise cattle the right way. So try it. You're going to love it. So go to backyardbutchers.com, enter the promo code VERDICT for up to 30% off, 2 free 10-ounce ribeyes, and free shipping when you subscribe. So fight back against Big Ag with your fork. Support American ranchers, support Texas, and you're going to get a great meal. Backyardbutchers.com, promo code VERDICT to get up to 30% off and 2 free 10-ounce ribeyes plus free shipping right now. All right, Senator, so let's just talk about where we are to give the updates. This is something I think it's important for us to do when it comes to shutdown. What is happening now in Washington? And I got a feeling you're going to be like nothing at all.
Yeah, look, it's October 15th. So one of the consequences is federal workers all across the federal government had their paycheck not direct deposited. And so for a lot of workers who are living paycheck to paycheck, it means they're not getting the check that they were planning on to pay their bills. They're not getting the check they're planning on to go to the grocery store. They're not getting the check they're planning on to pay health care expenses, tuition expenses, all daycare expenses, all of the day-to-day expenses. It was also scheduled to be the day on which our troops, our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen and Marines would not get paid either. And we've seen online images of young soldiers standing in line at food pantries to get food. You know, many of our young, particularly enlisted men and women are living on very limited budgets, and not getting a paycheck is a real hardship for them. Now, I will say the latter has not happened because President Trump has done something that I don't think has ever happened in a previous shutdown, which is he has readjusted money that was going to other expenses within the Department of War. He's shifted it around to an account to pay our servicemen and women. I'm grateful that he did so. It really is quite striking that the Democrats, multiple Democrats, are expressing dismay. How dare you pay our servicemen and women? But on Tuesday, the Senate came back in town, and we voted for the 9th time Republicans voted to reopen the government. I voted to reopen the government. We're ready to reopen it. And the Democrats came in almost party line. All but a couple of Democrats voted no, 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 keep the government down. And by the way, Schumer recently said it was, quote, better for Democrats to extend the government shutdown. Now, I got to say that's a cynical statement. They're counting on the media to be dishonest about what's going on. But listen, the end of this is it's going to end in the same place. At some point, the Democrats are going to give in. And I'll tell you what most of the Republican senators believe, myself included, which is the shutdown will continue at least until next week. And the reason for that is on October 18th, on Saturday, there is a big rally planned in Washington, D.C., the so-called No Kings rally, where a bunch of leftist radicals are going to be coming to Washington, D.C. to protest against Donald Trump, because that's what the left does, is they say, we hate Trump, we hate Trump. And what I'm hearing is the Democrats are terrified of reopening the government before that No Kings rally, because they think if they do reopen the government, those radicals will be furious. And listen, why are we having a shutdown? We're having a shutdown two reasons. Number one, because the Democrats want free taxpayer-provided health care for illegal aliens. But number two, the real reason we're having a shutdown is because Chuck Schumer is fighting for his political life, and he's trying to demonstrate to the radical left he hates Trump as much as they do. And so I think at a minimum, the shutdown will continue through this weekend. The earliest we see the government opening up is next week. But you know what? Schumer and the Democrats might make it drag out even further than that, because right now they seem utterly oblivious to the consequences of their massive political obstruction.
Yeah, it really is. And I go back to being held hostage and the fact that Democrats are really outraged over the idea of paying our military. I think that's just really gross. I am shocked they're not taking a bigger political hit, and the media is just giving them full coverage on this one to act like their outrage is somehow sane or normal. I actually think the American people look at this otherwise. Am I wrong?
Look, I think you're right, although candidly, I think each side lives in its own echo chamber. So I think if you're inclined to agree with Republicans, your view is, gosh, the Democrats are being ridiculous. This is a Schumer shutdown. Now, sadly, if you're inclined to agree with Democrats, if you're on the left, you're listening to CNN, you're listening to MSNBC, you're in an echo chamber where everyone you hear is saying it's the horrible Republicans, it's the horrible Republicans. And so I think that's part of the reason why the two sides have very different perspectives. I don't think this is going well for the Democrats at all. But I'm not sure they agree, because if they're just listening to their radicals, they think it's wonderful. By the way, their radicals would leave the government shut down for months and months and months, because all they care about is saying, we hate Trump. Now, here's how this is going to end. I don't think Chuck Schumer is going to end it. I don't think he's going to show any leadership, because I think he is terrified. He is hearing AOC breathing down his neck. What I think is going to happen is you're going to need at least 7 Democrats who decide, okay, enough is enough. Let's reopen the government. Let's stop this petulance. And I think it is going to be almost exclusively retiring Democrats, people who are on their way out, and Democrats who are not facing their left-wing voters anytime soon. My guess is Schumer never votes to open the government. But I think he may condone, he may look the other way and wink a couple of times at letting a little bit of a jailbreak, at letting 8 to 10 Democrats vote to say let's reopen the government. And I think all the rest of the Democrats vote no, no, no to preserve themselves from their left flank.
Do you believe that Democrats will actually sit down with Republicans? It's really something that hasn't happened. Certainly on the House side, Democrats are saying, oh, no, we have nothing to talk about. Do you think that Democrats will be let out of that jail once this No Kings rally takes place? And how quickly afterwards do you think we could actually see that conversation begin?
Well, look, right now, Schumer is not talking with Republican leadership. Hakeem Jeffries in the House is not talking with Republican leadership. I don't think it will be Democrat leadership. There's a group of about a dozen Democrat senators who are having conversations, and they're talking a little bit to Republicans. And I think the way this will end is after the rally. And by the way, think about it. If you're a federal worker right now and you're working at, say, the VA and you didn't get your paycheck today, the reason you didn't get your paycheck is the Democrats are scared to have a rally of radicals in Washington while they allowed you to get your paycheck. I mean, this is pure left-wing politics. And by the way, Schumer's comment on this, he said, quote, "Every day gets better for us." He said, quote, "Every day the Republicans refuse to negotiate to end this shutdown, the worse it gets for Americans and the clearer it becomes who's fighting for them." That is their view, that is at least the view of the radicals. But I think what you'll see is among that roughly dozen Democrats who are having conversations right now, you'll see 7, 8, 9 of them say, okay, let's open the government, and that's how this ends.
Final question on this. The president today at the White House did talk about, hey, you better get ready come Thursday, Friday. You guys don't get back on board of opening the government up. I'm going to start cutting Democratic programs because we think there's a lot of waste there, not Republican programs. Is that the type of leverage that we need right now?
Absolutely. So I was at the White House on Tuesday. I talked with many cabinet members. I talked with Russ Vought, who's the head of the Office of Management and Budget, and he's in charge of the layoffs. And they've already started. They've laid off thousands of federal government workers. And the Trump White House has said the longer the shutdown continues, the more government workers will be laid off, not furloughed temporarily, but laid off. And they're going to focus on policies and priorities that are inconsistent with the president's agenda, that are Democrat priorities. And I think that leverage will accelerate the Democrats saying, okay, we're going to stop holding the government hostage, and we're going to allow the clean continuing resolution that the House passed weeks ago. We're going to allow that to be signed into law.
Speaking of the White House, as you just mentioned, you were there with many cabinet members that were in attendance for a really, I think, special moment. You and I had the honor and the privilege to go to the memorial service for Charlie Kirk. What we witnessed today was something incredible. Donald Trump awarded Charlie Kirk the Medal of Freedom on what would have been his 32nd birthday at the White House. And his wife, his widow, Erica, was there to accept this. It was a moving moment, and you were there for all of it.
So it was truly a beautiful day. It was a beautiful fall day in October in Washington, D.C. The sun was out. We were in the Rose Garden, and in the Rose Garden you had a lot of members of Congress. You had virtually the entire cabinet came out for it, and Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, was there. The president really, I think, did a very good job remembering Charlie, speaking from the heart, honoring Charlie's legacy, and presenting him with the highest civilian honor we have in this country. And in the military context, the Medal of Honor is the highest recipient that can be awarded an individual. In the civilian context, the Medal of Freedom is the highest honor that can be awarded an individual. And to give it to Charlie, it was bittersweet because Charlie would have been 32. He was a young man. He had an incredibly bright future. As you and I have talked about, we both have known Charlie a long time. I considered Charlie a very close friend. Heidi and I met Charlie when he was just 18 years old, when he was a kid. You know, at the ceremony at the White House, I met Charlie's parents. I had not met his parents before, and I had an opportunity to just tell both his mom and dad, say, look, Heidi and I, we love Charlie, and when we got to know him 14 years ago, his vision then was as clear as it was the day he died. His vision of creating a movement to energize, to mobilize young people, to love freedom, to love free enterprise, to love the Constitution, to love America. That vision, you could see it. When I met him, he was this tall, lanky 18-year-old kid. He was fresh out of high school, had not gone to college. And you got to remember the context. This is 2012, beginning of 2013. Barack Obama had just been reelected. The Democrats were resurgent. At that point, young people being a Democrat, an Obama Democrat, was hip and cool. The idea of energizing a lot of young people to be conservatives frankly sounded loony. It did not sound like an easy task at all. A lot of people in the Republican Party said this will never work. But Charlie had a vision, and I was telling his mom and dad, I said, look, his vision was extraordinary. One of the things I said to them is I said, look, we are grieving the loss of your son. He was extraordinary. I'm so sorry. So sorry for your loss. But I said, you know what? I think in the last month, it may well be possible that more people have heard the gospel than in any comparable period of our lifetimes. That memorial service in Arizona for Charlie was a global event where people heard the gospel. And I got to say, at Charlie's funeral service, when Erica stood up and she talked about how when Jesus was hanging on the cross and he was looking down at the Roman soldiers who had nailed him to the cross, who were in the process of killing him, and Jesus said from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And she talked about how Charlie really had a mission for young people, particularly young men who are often disaffected, disillusioned, to help them find their way and find a purpose in life, a meaningful purpose that provides real satisfaction and real reason for living. And she talked about that young man who shot Charlie, that young man. And then she said, and I got to say, as she was doing this wind-up, I knew you knew where she was going. And I got to tell you, you and I were standing next to each other. I literally held my breath. I'm like, is she going to be able to say this? And she stood up with the eyes of the world upon him and said, that young man, the young man who pulled the trigger and murdered her husband, murdered the father of her children, she said, I forgive him. I don't know that there was a dry eye in the house. And one of the things that is so incredible is millions of people were watching that. And listen, if you're a Christian, you understand, just like Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, even as they were killing him. But if you're not a Christian, I believe thousands, if not millions of people looked at each other and said, how can she say that? Where does that come from? Where does that forgiveness come from? Where does that love come from? And I think it was as powerful a testament of the gospel as we have seen in a long, long time. And I got to say, today, the president spoke beautifully. And by the way, when Erica said, I forgive him, Ben, I hope and pray you or I are never in that situation. I don't know that those words could come out of my mouth. I would want them to. I would desperately want them to, but the strength it took for her to say those words, I find utterly astonishing. And I told Charlie's parents, I said, listen, I so wish Charlie were with us today. But millions have heard the gospel in the last several weeks because of Charlie, and that is one hell of a legacy.
So for the last several weeks, you've heard me talk with Josh Sherrard from Byrna. He's been telling stories of how people just like you have used their Byrna launcher to protect themselves and their families. Now, Byrna is a handheld pistol that fires both kinetic rounds and chemical irritants to separate you from an attacker, and it can be life-saving. Josh is back with me today to tell another story about how a former professional race car driver saved his family from an attack outside the garage of their own home. Josh, tell me about this.
Yeah, it just happened actually not too long ago in Santa Monica, just 2 blocks from the beach. So former pro race car driver Court Wagner was pulling into his garage with his family in the car when he was confronted by a man hiding in the alley. After trying to talk to him into leaving, it was obviously not going to work. The man lunged at Court with a sharp object, trying to attack him. With his wife and child only steps away, he grabbed his Byrna launcher that he kept in the glove box of his car and fired 5 rounds, striking the attacker several times. The suspect fled immediately. It worked, and court called the police and gave them the description of the assailant. Well, police were able to locate someone that somewhat matched the description in the area, but not quite exactly. And it wasn't until officers lifted the suspect's shirt and saw the multiple welts from the Byrna launcher that they knew they had the right guy and subsequently arrested him.
It really is incredible. And I get this question now often when I'm out, and that is, okay, tell me about how a launcher works. And they worry about, or they wonder about, the stopping power of less lethal weapons. I've used it. It's amazing. I have it in all of my cars right now because I want to have this option.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the stopping power is great no matter if you're using our kinetic rounds or even the chemical agent rounds that obviously have the gas in them, the tear gas, the pepper spray that's going to incapacitate them. I mean, this is a great case of how some resistance, enough resistance, obviously to cause these welts, immediately stopped the situation and was able to provide that safety for Court and his family.
It really is incredible. If you want more information on what I carry and how you and your family members can protect themselves with a Byrna launcher, whether it is for a daughter or for a family member or a grandparent, go to Byrna, BYRNA.com. That's Byrna, BYRNA.com. Again, Byrna.com right now. You know, I think one of the most incredible things that you just mentioned is the legacy. And one of the things that the president said today at the White House, for people that didn't hear it, was talking about Charlie Kirk being a martyr. And this is what the president said about that.
He said on the day that he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for truth and for freedom. And from Socrates to think, and to St. Peter, from Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King, those who change history the most, and he really did, have always risked their lives for causes they were put on earth to defend. He was put on earth to do exactly what he was doing. He didn't want to waste time. He would have been a top student at any college in the country. I know the college as well. He's smarter than the guys there. He was so smart. But he almost, I guess, didn't have the time. He knew what he wanted to do. It wasn't like, gee, I want to sit in the classroom for 4 years listening to people teach me liberal principles, because they were never going to teach him that anyway. But he didn't have the time. He really didn't have the time. But every time the enemies of goodness and virtue tried to silence the voice of righteous and noble leaders like Charlie, they failed. They seem to fail. Ultimately, they look like they're doing well, and then they end up failing, because the truth has been unrelenting over the years, over history. And people like Charlie, it's just they've got a power that others don't have and very few people will ever have. So today, like those martyrs before him, Charlie's voice, his message, and his legacy are stronger and greater than ever before. They are greater than ever before.
You know, him saying, as I said on the day he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for truth and for freedom.
Yep.
And I couldn't agree more. To compare him as he did to St. Peter, to Abraham Lincoln, to Martin Luther King Jr., these are people that change history. Charlie will be remembered in the same breath with those types of leaders. And I think that's part of the legacy. And as you mentioned, not only did Charlie and his legacy now, it is 100% setting, I think, young men and young women on fire to be bolder in their faith, to be better Christians, and to seek the truth of the Bible and the gospel. And just what he was able to do in his death is phenomenal. But also what he was doing to fight for this country at the same time. That is going to be a legacy that's going to live on because of so many people that are going to do it for Charlie. I think you and I would include ourselves in that as well.
Well, listen, he was a martyr for freedom and a martyr for truth. I also told Charlie's parents, I think more people heard Charlie's words in the last 4 weeks than heard them in the entire 31, nearly 32 years of his life. That the number of people who went and said, who was this Charlie Kirk guy? What did he have to say? Who listened to exchanges as he was on college campuses, as he was engaging with people who disagreed with him, as he treated them with respect, with dignity. That is a powerful legacy. I will tell you one of the things that was also striking about the Medal of Freedom ceremony is it was a continuation of a conversation that happened at Charlie's funeral ceremony. So at the funeral, Erica Kirk spoke, and I mentioned how she said that she forgives the murderer who murdered her husband. and she talks about how Jesus teaches us to love our enemies. And Trump spoke at the funeral, and he gave, I think, very strong remarks. But one of the things he said that's something he had a great deal of difficulty doing, that he did not love his enemies, that he hated his enemies, and he liked to fight his enemies. And he kind of laughed about it, but he said that. And that was a back and forth from Arizona. Well, in the Rose Garden, Trump brought it up again. And look, President Trump knew Charlie very well, and he said, I know Erica talked about how he loved his enemies, but he said, when I talked to Charlie, he said, I'm not sure I saw that. I think he, like when he was in a battle, he would fight his enemies and fight them vigorously. And listen, Charlie was a strong man and a passionate man who knew what he believed. But it was very interesting. Erica spoke after the president in the Rose Garden. And she gave beautiful remarks, but one of the things she said that I think was directly responding to the president, she said, look, I can tell you from having been married to him, Charlie prayed for his enemies. And she said, I saw that. She said, I don't know that anyone else saw that, but she said, I saw him and he prayed for his enemies. And President Trump was standing behind her right shoulder, and she said it was lighthearted, but she was in many ways responding to the president. He laughed. He was good-natured, but he was genuinely laughing. And it was I think it was a good back and forth that we should be vigorous in what we believe. We should not give in to those who argue for positions that are harmful to America. We should be full-throated in our argument. But I also think that the message that Erica was carrying forward about it's possible to disagree, and look, you go watch the exchanges Charlie had on college campus after college campus when you would have someone come in and argue for open borders, when you would have someone come in and argue for socialism, when you'd have someone come in and argue for transgenderism, when you'd have someone come in and argue for Hamas terrorists. Charlie was vigorous and full-throated in disputing them, but he was not mean-spirited about it. He was not, I hate you. He was not, you're the enemy. But he would engage in a way that said, look, I understand why you're saying that. Here's why I believe you're mistaken. And I think Erica was right that he was able to do so from a position of love. Love does not mean agreement. Love does not mean saying, I accept the position you're advocating even though I believe it is harmful to our country. But love means not treating your political adversary as the enemy to be destroyed, but instead trying to respond with reason, with compassion, trying to move, and even if you don't move your immediate interlocutor, those who are observing it, Charlie was very good at responding in a way that persuaded a lot of other people. And I thought that back and forth Tuesday between the president and Erica was really powerful.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone that is listening right now, if you did not get to see specifically Erica's remarks, go listen to them and go listen to Donald Trump's full remarks as we played one of the highlights here. But there was a lot that was said, and it wasn't covered in the same way, obviously, that his memorial was covered. I'm still in shock that we're a month since we lost Charlie Kirk, but today was a very special day. I'm so thankful the president did this. I'm thankful that his parents were there, that they got to see how many people he influenced, the most important people in our government, the president of the United States of America. And just to be able to hear from people like you, Senator, and to love on them and to let them know that their son's life mattered in such a big way.
Amen, amen, amen.
Don't forget, we do the show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe or the auto download button wherever you get this podcast. Share it wherever you can. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Friday morning.